Tonight I will tell you a story woven from the softest threads of Middle-earth, a tale carried quietly on the western wind. It is a story of Gandalf, the wise and wandering wizard, and his long friendship with the great eagles, the guardians of the sky whose wings have brushed both storm and starlight, and whose eyes have seen both ruin and hope. And while you're here, if this kind of soft journey through Middle-earth brings peace to your heart, I invite you to like this story, to subscribe, and to hit the bell icon so that each time we open the book of Middle-earth once more, you will be the first to hear the pages turn. Before we begin this gentle tale, my sleepy fellows, allow me to guide you softly into the heart of what awaits. Tonight's story is not a grand adventure of swords and fire, nor a tale of dark lords and heavy burdens. No, tonight we walk a quieter path, one that unfolds high above the earth, where the winds carry secrets and the sky itself remembers ancient promises. This is the story of Gandalf and the Eagles, a tale of quiet friendship, born not in times of peace but in moments of need, and yet forged into something far greater than rescue or chance encounter. It is a tale that spans centuries, for the Eagles have seen the shaping of the world from their high perches, and Gandalf, wise and wandering, has always known to look to the sky when hope seemed lost. Together, they have shared moments few know, moments when a single flight carried the weight of countless lives, and moments when no words were spoken, yet understanding passed like sunlight between feather and hand. It is the story of trust, the kind that grows not from oaths or bargains, but from standing side by side in both storm and silence. As we drift deeper into this tale, you will hear of the first time Gandalf stood upon an eagle's back, feeling the rush of air and the pull of sky beneath him. You will travel with me to the eyrie, high in the Misty Mountains, where the eagles gather beyond the reach of mortal feet. And you will come to understand why, in the quiet hours when hope flickers dim, Gandalf has always looked to the sky, not for answers, but for the touch of an old friend's wing. So, if you find comfort in stories of gentle loyalty, in whispers of wind through ancient feathers, and in the knowledge that even in the darkest moments, a friend may still come soaring out of the sky, then stay with me, dear listeners. Now, close your eyes if you wish, and let the story lift you like a gentle breeze beneath your dreams. The sky is waiting, and so are they. Our story begins not in the heart of a great hall or at the edge of some perilous battlefield, but instead upon a lonely ridge in the heart of Middle-earth, where the air was thin and clear, and the wind carried only the scent of stone, sky, and cloud. It was here, upon a narrow ledge high in the Misty Mountains, that a gray figure once stood, his cloak tugged gently by the breeze, his wide-brimmed hat tilted low against the fading light. Gandalf the Grey, as most knew him, was a wizard of many names and many faces. To some, he was Mithrandir, the Grey Pilgrim, a fleeting shadow upon the road. To others, he was Tharkun, the Wanderer, who spoke kindly to dwarves and drank from humble wooden cups. But to those who truly knew him, and there were few indeed, he was something gentler still. He was a friend to the quiet places of the world, to the old trees who whispered secrets through their roots, and to the wild creatures who did not speak in words, but in wind and wing. He was not a figure of grandeur. His beard, though long and silvered with age, was often tangled by the wind. His staff, worn smooth by endless miles, creaked softly when he leaned upon it. And yet, despite his humble appearance, there was something about him, a light that lived behind his weathered eyes, a sense that he had seen the dawn of the world and had carried its stories ever since. It was on this very ledge, long before Bilbo's unexpected journey or Frodo's heavy burden, that Gandalf first raised his hand to the sky, calling upon an ancient friendship, a friendship older than many remembered, though the sky itself never forgot. The eagles of Middle-earth were no ordinary birds. They were ancient spirits given form, guardians of the sky shaped by the will of the Valor themselves. Their wingspan could darken the sun, and their eyes could see across leagues of land and time alike. But they were no one's servants, nor were they easily swayed by mortal need. Yet Gwaihir the Windlord, proud and mighty, had once offered his wing in aid of Gandalf, not from duty, but from something far deeper, respect, and a shared understanding that both sky and earth carried burdens too heavy for either to bear alone. This was no chance alliance. It was a friendship carved from storm and silence, where Gandalf's wisdom met Gwaihir's skybound strength, and a quiet trust was formed. It was this bond, fragile at first, then was unshakable, that would lead Gandalf to call upon the eagles in times of greatest need, knowing they would come, not because they were summoned, but because a friend had called. And so, on this ridge, beneath a sky brushed gold, with the first stars of evening, our story begins. With a wizard standing alone, and a great shadow descending from the clouds, wings wide, eyes bright, and the hush of the wind carrying the first whispered word of a friendship that would one day save all of Middle-earth. Gandalf's feet were firmly planted upon the narrow ledge, but his mind stretched far beyond the stone beneath him. The air was thin this high in the Misty Mountains, where few ever dared to climb. Below, mist pooled between the jagged peaks like an ocean held captive, rolling gently in the dimming light. Above, the sky blushed pale gold and lavender, the first stars flickering softly into sight. The wizard raised his hand, fingers slightly curled, as though catching a thought that drifted through the air. And for a long moment, there was silence. Not the heavy silence of fear or waiting, but the ancient hush of something remembered, as if the stones themselves held their breath. Far off, a single cry split the air, high and sharp, yet distant as a memory. Gandalf smiled, soft and knowing, for he recognized the voice before the shadow appeared. A great shape swept across the fading sky, wings wide, feathers streaked with gold and silver light. Gwaihir, Lord of Eagles, his presence both mighty and calm. This was not their first meeting, nor their first parting. Their friendship had been woven over many years, each thread added not by words alone, but by the quiet trust that comes when lives are shared in moments of danger and stillness alike. As Gwaihir settled onto a rocky perch beside him, talons curling over the weathered stone, Gandalf offered no grand greeting, only a gentle nod, as one might greet an old friend long absent, yet never truly gone. The beginning of this bond stretched back to an age many had already forgotten, to a time before dragons stirred beneath mountains and before hobbits had carved their first round doors. Gandalf, newly arrived in Middle-earth, had wandered these very peaks, seeking signs of the world's deeper heartbeat, the quiet songs left behind by the valor who had shaped the earth when it was young and wild. It was during one such solitary climb through snow and mist that Gandalf had slipped, his footing lost on an icy ledge. The fall would have sent him tumbling into the chasm below, but a sudden shadow passed over him, and a great wind lifted him upward. Feathers brushed his shoulder, talons clasped his cloak, and with effortless grace, Gwaihir had borne him skyward, not because Gandalf had called, but because the eagles watched all things, and in that moment they had seen something in him worth saving. Over the years, their paths crossed again and again, never by design, yet always with purpose. When Gandalf wandered too near the desolation of Angmar, Gwaihir's shadow would sometimes glide silently overhead, a quiet reminder that the sky had not forgotten him. And when the wizard stood upon a lonely hill, watching thunderstorms gather over the plains, he would often see a distant shape riding the wind, a watcher in the sky who understood that even the wise sometimes need to be carried. The Shire knew nothing of these friendships, of course. To the hobbits, Gandalf was merely a wandering conjurer, a keeper of fireworks and teller of tales. They could not have imagined the weight carried by his old staff, or the memories folded into his cloak like letters tucked inside a pocket. Even Bilbo, in all his wonder and worry, never knew that the wizard who knocked upon his round green door had once stood at the edge of the world, held aloft only by the strength of an eagle's wing. On this particular day, Gandalf had not come to the mountains by accident. Rumors had reached his ears, faint whispers from Rivendell, old stories carried by wandering dwarves who spoke of creatures in flight, shadows above the clouds, larger than any eagle should be. Some said they were fell beasts, drawn from the black pits of Mordor. Others swore they were ancient spirits, awoken by forgotten spells. But Gandalf knew the truth lay somewhere quieter, not in fear, but in memory. The eagles were restless, and when the eagles stirred, it was never without cause. As he stood beside Gwaihir, the sky growing darker, Gandalf spoke softly. "What has disturbed the air, old friend?" Gwaihir's head turned slightly, his golden eye glinting in the fading light. Eagles spoke seldom in words, for they had no need. Their language was written upon the wind itself, in the tilt of a wing, in the arc of a dive, in the way feathers ruffled against a rising storm. But tonight, Gwaihir gave voice to his thoughts. "The skies remember what the earth forgets," the eagle said, his voice deep and low, like distant thunder rolling across the sky. "Old powers move beneath the surface, powers that once shaped the wind itself." Gandalf's brow furrowed. "Valinor?" Gwaihir gave no answer, but the breeze that stirred between them carried the scent of salt and distant rain, the scent of the sea, though no sea lay near. It was a scent Gandalf had not smelled since the last ships sailed from the Grey Havens. carrying the firstborn westward, beyond the world's curve. The wizard understood then. Whatever disturbance had awakened the eagle's memory was not of this age alone. It was something older than men, older than dwarves, older than even the first sunrise. They spoke until the stars were bright above them, piecing together fragments of memory like scattered jewels. Gwaihir remembered a voice, ancient and bright, calling to the eagles long ago when the world was young. Gandalf recalled a song, sung once in Valinor before the breaking of the world, a song that called the winds to rise and carry ships across the sky itself. Somewhere, somehow, that ancient memory had stirred again. And if the eagles were restless, the world itself must be remembering something it once lost. With the first light of dawn, Gandalf climbed onto Gwaihir's back, not as a wizard commanding a servant, but as a friend asking for guidance. Together, they soared into the sky, chasing the memory of an ancient call, their flight tracing the very veins of the earth's oldest dreams. They would follow the wind itself, wherever it led, for only the wind remembered the path between earth and sky, the secret way once used by the great eagles of old when they flew west, beyond sight, into the light of Valinor itself. And though Gandalf's heart was heavy with wonder and concern, there was peace in the flight too, for some roads must be walked with friends, and some memories are too vast to carry alone. The air grew colder as they flew higher, the land falling away beneath them, the sky stretching endless ahead. But somewhere, just beyond the horizon, the truth waited, not in fire or shadow, but in the quiet space where sky meets sea, where the memory of the first song still hums beneath the wind. And so, the journey began, not with a roar, but with the soft beat of wings and the fading echo of a song too ancient for words. Gandalf and Gwaihir flew toward the memory of Valinor, two old friends chasing the sky's own longing. The wind had teeth at this height, sharp and thin, slicing through Gandalf's cloak and beard as if no wool or weathered skin could stop it. He clutched Gwaihir's feathers tightly, his fingers woven into the soft but unyielding plumage, while his eyes remained fixed ahead into the heart of the sky, where dawn was only just beginning to bloom. Beneath them, Middle-earth unfurled like a great tapestry, ridges, rivers, forests, and plains rolling one into the next, a world both ancient and young. And yet, Gandalf's mind was far older than the lands below, stretching back beyond memory to a time before even the first sun had shone. They flew westward, always westward, for the wind itself seemed to pull them there, as though the very air remembered some ancient duty, some long-forgotten path. And as they flew, the wizard felt something stirring, not in the sky, nor in the earth, but in himself, a memory that had lived so long buried beneath duty and care that it had almost faded entirely. It had been long before Gandalf wore the form of an old man, back in the days of his true self, when he was Olorin, a Maya who dwelt in the gardens of Lorien. There, beneath silver trees, he had first heard the call of Manwë, Lord of the Winds. It was not a command nor a summons, but a song that gathered the winds and shaped them into roads that no foot could tread. It was this same song, faint but unmistakable, that Gandalf now felt beneath his skin, vibrating through Gwaihir's feathers and curling in the air like mist caught in moonlight. The sky itself remembered. Gandalf leaned forward, his voice low. "Do you feel it, my friend?" Gwaihir did not answer with words, but his wings shifted, a slight turn, a gentler beat, as if the air itself had changed. The mist thickened ahead, glowing faintly in the new sunlight, not with the soft gold of morning, but with a light that felt older, like the memory of starlight before the world was fully made. It swirled like breath exhaled from the earth itself, veiling the sky ahead. Gwaihir did not falter. His wings cleaved through the mist as though it were water, and Gandalf felt the world soften around them, the edges of time itself blurring, until it was no longer clear whether they flew above the world or above memory itself. The mist parted suddenly, and before them stood something Gandalf had not seen in countless ages, a waystone carved from a single piece of pale stone, its surface weathered, but still shimmering with faint elven script. It floated above the earth, untouched by time or gravity, held aloft by the will of the world itself. It was a marker of the straight road, the hidden path that led west beyond the circles of the world, a road only the elves could take, or so it had always been believed. Gandalf's breath caught in his throat. This should not be here. Gwaihir banked, circling the stone, and the air around them seemed to hum, not with danger, but with something far stranger, invitation. When they landed upon a narrow ridge below the waystone, Gandalf slid from Gwaihir's back, his boots pressing into damp earth. The wind stirred around him, and the mist pooled at his feet like silver water. Slowly, the wizard approached the stone, his fingers brushing its surface, tracing the ancient runes. The words were not a warning, nor a command. They were a reminder, a gentle whisper carved in elven script. All roads end, but some roads remember. It was a phrase Gandalf knew, though not from books or songs. It was something Olorin had once heard upon the Tanacatil, where Manwë sat beneath the sky. It was the secret truth of the straight road, that even though the elves sailed west upon it, the road itself remained woven into the world's memory, appearing only to those who carried that memory within themselves. For a moment, Gandalf felt something strange, a quiet ache, not sorrowful, but full of yearning, a longing not for Valinor itself, but for the memory of what the world was before shadow touched it, when air and earth and sea still sang in harmony. Gwaihir stood beside him, feathers ruffling in the wind. "The sky remembers," the eagle said softly, "but it is fading." Gandalf turned to his old friend. "Why does the road show itself now, after so long hidden?" The eagle's golden eye met Gandalf's, and for the briefest moment, Gandalf saw reflected there the white shores of Valinor, waves lapping softly upon ancient sands. And then the image was gone, leaving only sky and stone. "Because the earth is afraid," Gwaihir said, "and when the earth fears forgetting, it calls upon the sky." They sat together for some time, wizard and eagle, neither speaking, both simply listening to the wind, which carried the faintest echo of that ancient song. And Gandalf understood then that this was no summons, Valinor was not calling for help. This was a reminder, meant not for the elves who still remembered the way home, but for Middle-earth itself, a call to the land, to the waters, to the skies, and to those few hearts who could still hear it. The straight road was not only a path to leave the world, it was also a memory woven into the bones of Middle-earth, a promise that light and memory were never truly lost, even when the sea lay silent. As the sun rose higher, Gandalf traced the runes once more, feeling the weight of his own years, the long road he had walked, and the quiet truth that all journeys, no matter how long, must eventually turn homeward. "Will you fly me farther?" Gandalf asked softly. Gwaihir lowered his great head, his beak nearly brushing the earth. "As far as the sky remembers," the eagle replied. And so they rose into the air again, leaving the waystone behind, but not forgotten. For Gandalf knew now that his task was not only to guide others through shadow and flame, but also to keep the memory of light alive, to remind Middle-earth that the straight road was never truly gone, only hidden, waiting for those who remembered how to listen to the sky. Together, they followed the mist westward, into the thinning air where sky meets memory, and where even the smallest breath might carry the sound of ancient songs. As they flew, Gandalf's heart was strangely light, for he understood now that the eagles were not merely rescuers swooping in at the final hour. They were something far greater. They were the sky remembering the way home. And so, wizard and eagle flew westward, not to find answers, but to remember the questions, and to keep the world from forgetting the song that had shaped it, the song that still hummed softly, somewhere beyond the edge of the sky. The wind carried them westward, high above Middle-earth, where the world seemed small beneath their flight. Gandalf sat lightly upon Gwaihir's back, his cloak fluttering like a soft banner, and though his grip upon the eagle's feathers was steady, his mind wandered farther than the sky, deeper than the earth, into places where memory itself flowed like a hidden current beneath all things. The discovery of the Waystone had opened something within him, not just a path, but a remembrance. It was as though the earth had whispered a secret into his bones, a quiet urging to follow not only the sky, but the stories it had carried for countless ages. And so they flew, not chasing danger, nor fleeing shadow, but following the oldest whisper of all, the call to remember. The first sign of something ancient stirring came as they flew over the Anduin, its silver waters glittering beneath the afternoon sun. Below, the world continued in its quiet rhythms, fishermen drawing in nets, children running along riverbanks, smoke curling from distant hearths. But as they passed over a stretch where the river curved like a bent arm, Gandalf saw something, a shape half hidden in the reeds. Gwaihir circled lower, wings tilting gracefully, and Gandalf peered down to see a boat, long abandoned, its wood bleached and cracked with age. The prow was carved in the shape of a swan, its elegant neck curving toward the sky. Elven craft, unmistakable even at a glance. Gandalf's heart stirred with recognition, though the boat itself could not have been there for centuries. And yet, the way it lay, cradled gently by earth and water, seemed intentional, like a story placed carefully upon a shelf. Who left it here? Gandalf wondered aloud, his voice soft beneath the wind. The river remembers, Gwaihir answered, even when the land forgets. They did not land, for there was no need. The boat was not meant for hands, only for eyes, to remind, not to carry. But Gandalf knew this was part of the path they followed. For even where roads fade and stones crumble, memory lingers in the shape of things, in the way water curves around wood, or how reeds part gently for something once revered. As they climbed higher, the sky turned softer, the blue deepening into a shade Gandalf had not seen since the early days, a color remembered only by the Eldar, who spoke of skies above Cuivianen when the stars first opened their eyes. Evening brought them to the edges of Eregion, where the bones of ancient cities lay beneath moss and time. Here, beneath the shadow of the Misty Mountains, they descended at last, coming to rest upon a plateau ringed with standing stones, each one worn by rain, but still marked with elven runes faintly glowing in the twilight. They were not alone. A slender figure stood within the circle, a tall elf wrapped in a cloak the color of twilight, his hair silver as mist, and his face both young and ancient at once. His hands rested lightly on a staff made of smooth ashwood, and though his lips did not smile, his eyes held a welcome too deep for words. "Gandalf," the elf said, bowing his head slightly, "I felt the air change. I knew you would come." Gandalf dismounted, boots pressing softly into the grass. "Then you feel it too," the wizard said. "The sky remembers, and so does the earth." The elf nodded. "We have always remembered, but memory alone is no longer enough. The paths are stirring. The straight road itself shivers." They gathered around a small fire, no brighter than starlight, the elf seated gracefully on a flat stone, Gandalf beside him, Gwaihir a dark shape nearby, his great wings folded like a resting storm. The elf's name was Calanhir, a wanderer from Lindon, one of the last who remembered standing upon the shores of Beleriand before it sank beneath the sea. His voice was soft, but it carried weight, each word shaped with the care of someone who knew stories could outlive the teller. He spoke of the straight road, not as a simple path across water, but as something more, a bridge woven from memory itself, a thread connecting Middle-earth to the undying lands. Not by distance, but by remembrance. When the Valor sang the world into shape, Calanhir said, they did not craft only mountains and seas, they crafted the ways between things, the roads that no feet walk, but which all hearts know. It was then Gandalf asked the question that had stirred within him since the Waystone. "Why now?" he said softly. "Why does the path stir after so long?" Calanhir's face turned toward the sky, where stars were blooming one by one. "Because the world itself fears forgetting. The elves are leaving, the old songs fade, and when memory grows thin, the earth calls out, not for glory, but for witnesses. Someone must see what is passing, or the road itself will vanish, and the song will end." Gandalf understood then. This was no summons for aid, nor a warning of danger. It was a call to remember, to walk the ancient paths, not to save the world, but to bear witness to its fading beauty, to hold its memory so that even after the last ship sails, the story will not be lost. They spoke long into the night, Gandalf, Calanhir, and Gwaihir, 3 witnesses from sky, earth, and sea. The elf shared songs too old for books, verses passed down from the first wanderers who saw the world's shape emerge from shadow. And as he sang, the stars seemed to draw nearer, their light warming the stones themselves, as though even the sky wanted to listen. Before dawn, Calanhir led them to the edge of the plateau, where a narrow path descended into mist, a hidden road known only to those who listen. "This is not the straight road," Calanhir said, "but it remembers where it leads." Gandalf bowed his head in quiet thanks, then climbed once more onto Gwaihir's back. Together, wizard and eagle rose into the thinning night, the mist parting beneath them like a veil drawn back, and below, the elf watched until they vanished into the sky, whispering softly to the air, "Tell the wind we remember." They flew westward once more, but now the sky itself seemed softer, each gust carrying the weight of countless unsung songs, each cloud brushing against them like a hand on a shoulder. And somewhere far ahead, beyond the sight of mortal eyes, the straight road shimmered faintly, like a silver thread stretched between worlds, waiting for those who remembered to follow the sky's longing home. For the first time in many years, Gandalf felt not the weight of burden, but the warmth of companionship, carried aloft by wind, wing, and memory. The sky was no longer merely sky. It was story, still unfolding. The wind was softer now, as if the sky itself was exhaling a long-held breath. Gandalf sat upon Gwaihir's back, his hands resting lightly in the eagle's feathers, no longer needing to clutch or brace. The rhythm of flight had become something gentle, almost meditative. The steady rise and fall of wings was like the beating of a great heart beneath him. They had left behind the familiar lands of Middle-earth, the forests and rivers giving way to gray waters and veiled skies, the air itself turning thinner and sharper, as if they had crossed into a place where the world's skin grew fragile. The straight road was not something visible in the ordinary sense. It could not be mapped or measured, for it was less a physical road than a path laid between memory and sea, a shimmering seam between what was and what could still be. Yet Gandalf felt it, as clearly as if it had been marked beneath Gwaihir's wings, a current in the air, pulling westward, so subtle it could only be followed by those who knew how to listen. Gandalf remembered what Calanhir had said, that the earth itself was afraid of forgetting, and in that fear, the world had called upon sky and sea alike, stirring ancient memories into wakefulness, asking the eagles, the wanderers, and the wise to bear witness to what might soon be lost. The air grew colder still, and the mist that had clung to the edges of the sky deepened into silver fog, the kind that swallows sound and blurs the line between sky and sea. It was here, within that hush, that Gandalf saw them, other shapes, faint at first, flying in slow circles within the mist. Eagles, not just Gwaihir's kin, but eagles from ages past, their feathers streaked not just with gold, but with hues no longer seen in Middle-earth, copper as the first dawn, silver as Telperion's light. black as the sky before the first star was kindled. These were the eagles of memory, the spirits of the sky's own past, roused from long sleep to remember the road home. Gwaihir tilted his wings slightly, and Gandalf knew this was no ordinary gathering. The sky itself had called council, a gathering of wings and wind from across the ages, a remembrance not just of flight, but of purpose. They flew slowly into the heart of the mist, where no land could be seen, only the soft glow of light ahead, neither sun nor star, but something older, the faint shimmer of the straight road itself, revealed in the air like a thread made of pearl and memory. Gandalf closed his eyes, listening. The song was there, the song of the first call, the same melody Olorin had heard upon Tanicatil when Manwë stood beneath the open sky, his hands raised to the winds. It was not a song of command, nor a spell. It was a remembering, a weaving of earth, sky, and sea into a single breath, the breath that still held the memory of the music of the Ainur before the world took shape. Gandalf realized then that this was why he had come, not to find the road, not to open it, but simply to witness that it still existed, to carry that memory back into the lands where it might be forgotten. Gwaihir's wings slowed, and they hovered just above the shimmering thread of the straight road. Gandalf could see it now, a path made of starlight and sea foam, stretching westward beyond sight, curving gently out of the world itself, leading to shores only remembered in song and sorrow. But they could not pass beyond. This was not their time. Gandalf had known this from the beginning, though his heart ached with the beauty of it, the longing to follow that light just a little farther, to see the shores of Valinor one last time. But his task was not to cross. It was to remember for those who could not see. A new shape emerged from the mist ahead, a single white gull gliding gracefully along the path, its wings brushing lightly against the silver light below. It was a simple creature, but Gandalf knew it for what it was, a messenger of the sea, sent not to speak, but to show that the road still lived. The gull turned, flying back toward them, and for a moment it passed directly over Gwaihir's head, its wings almost touching the eagle's crown. And in that moment, Gandalf saw something flicker within Gwaihir's eyes, a memory not his own, a glimpse of eagles who had flown this path before the world broke, long before the world became round and the road became hidden. The eagle's voice was soft. The sky remembers. Gandalf smiled, a weary, gentle smile. That is enough, he said softly. That is all we ever needed. They turned back, the straight road fading behind them, slipping once more into the hush of forgotten things. The mist parted, and the sky grew wide again, blue and golden, with Middle-earth spread below like a tapestry stitched with forests, rivers, and fields. Gandalf's heart was light, not because they had uncovered some hidden power, but because they had preserved something fragile, the knowledge that the road still lay westward, waiting, remembered not just by elves and wizards, but by the earth itself and by those who had the wisdom to look up. They descended slowly, coming to rest once more upon a rocky ledge above the world, where the wind carried the scent of earth and growing things. Gandalf stepped down from Gwaihir's back, boots pressing into the soft earth, and for a moment the wizard stood still, his hands folded over the head of his staff, his gaze turned toward the west. The eagle remained beside him, his wings half folded, golden eyes watching the horizon where the sky bent toward the sea. There were no words between them, because none were needed. They had seen what they came to see, and more importantly, they had remembered. And in that remembering, they had done what all friends do when the world grows heavy. They had carried the weight of memory together so that no one heart bore it alone. When Gandalf finally turned, stepping away from the ledge, he felt lighter. Not because the burdens of Middle-earth had lessened, but because he knew now, even if every elf sailed west, even if every old song faded into silence, the world itself would remember. The sky would carry the memory in the beating of wings. The earth would hold it in the hush of ancient stones, and the sea would whisper it back to the shore with every wave. And when the day came, and Gandalf knew it would, when the last ship sailed from the Grey Havens, when the final light faded into the west, there would still be a whisper on the wind, a quiet hum beneath the stars, reminding even the smallest hobbit who paused to listen that the road home is never truly lost. He climbed once more onto Gwaihir's back, and together they flew back toward the heart of Middle-earth, back to lands where shadows still gathered, where wars still loomed, and where small hands would soon carry great burdens. But Gandalf carried something too, now, a secret memory, a quiet proof that even when darkness fell, the light still knew the way home. And beside him, Gwaihir flew not as a rescuer, nor as a herald, but as a friend who had also remembered, for sometimes all that saves the world is memory, and the courage to carry it back into the heart of the earth. The sun hung low as Gandalf and Gwaihir began their descent, the gentle hum of the wind softening into a tender hush. The sky stretched wide, painted in soft gold and gentle rose, with threads of silver cloud drifting like unspun wool across the heavens. The world beneath them seemed quieter somehow, as though even the earth had paused to listen, aware that something ancient had just been remembered. Gwaihir's wings beat slower now, easing them both back toward the familiar earth, to the lands where trees held roots deep in time, and rivers carried stories older than any who walked their banks. As they drifted lower, the wizard's thoughts wandered, not into worries of war or shadow, nor even toward the tasks that still lay before him, but into the quiet corners of his own heart, where memory and longing shared a single seat. He thought of Valinor, that distant shore he had once known, not as a hope or a myth, but as a place beneath his very feet, its light not something remembered, but something he had walked beneath. He had once left that light behind, stepping into Middle-earth as Olorin, a simple wanderer in gray, bound not to glory, but to the gentle tending of small lights in a darkening world. And now, for the first time in many long years, he had glimpsed it again, not through a vision nor a fleeting dream, but through the sky itself, a memory too old to name, carried upon the feathers of a friend. As they passed once more over the winding curves of the Anduin, Gandalf gazed down at the silver river, the sunlight glimmering like a path of coins strewn carelessly upon the water. Somewhere in the reeds below, that ancient elven boat still rested, a quiet reminder that memory did not belong to wizards or elves alone, but to the very earth which held the stories of all who had passed over it. That was the heart of this journey, Gandalf realized, not to find some hidden power, nor to unlock some ancient gate, but to witness, to remember, to ensure that even when the last ship sailed, the story would still remain, held softly in the breath of the wind, in the hush between waves, in the quiet moments when sky and earth brushed against one another like old friends meeting in the dusk. They landed at last upon a low hill, crowned with swaying grass, where the wind whispered and the earth hummed faintly beneath their feet. Gandalf stepped down from Gwaihir's back, his knees bending softly, and for a long moment he simply stood, leaning upon his staff, breathing in the scents of grass and soil, the ordinary beauty of the world he had come to love so dearly. The eagle stood beside him, feathers ruffling slightly in the breeze, his gaze turned westward still. There was no need for words between them. What they had seen together, and that made all the difference, for no memory is too heavy when carried by friends. Gandalf smiled, not the bright smile of jest or celebration, but the soft, contented smile of one who had seen both the first light and the fading dusk, and who found beauty in both. "I suppose," Gandalf said quietly, "that is the true task of the wise, not to shape the world, nor to command it, but simply to remember it well, to hold its beauty tenderly, even as it changes, to be witnesses before the story slips away." Gwaihir inclined his great head, golden eyes soft in the evening light. "The sky remembers," the eagle said, "because you asked it to." As the sky darkened, stars began to bloom, first one, then a handful, then 1,000 bright blossoms, scattered across the heavens like seeds of light, cast by some unseen hand. Gandalf remembered standing beneath such skies long before the world knew moon or sun, when only the starlight of Varda lit the earth, and even the eagles were young. It gave him comfort, knowing that some things endured, not unchanged, but remembered. The stars were not the same stars, not exactly, but they were part of the same story, their light of a continuation of the first light. That was the gift of memory, not to keep the past locked and lifeless, but to allow it to live again in new skies, in new hearts, in new hands too small to know how precious they were. As Gandalf turned back eastward, toward the lands where his work was far from finished, he felt lighter somehow, as though a burden long carried had eased, not because it was gone, but because it was shared. The eagles would remember, the earth would remember, and perhaps, if they were lucky, even the smallest among them, hobbits tending quiet gardens, children watching stars from windowsills, might remember too, for not all who guard the world wear crowns or bear swords. Some only listen, and in that listening, they keep the world whole. Before stepping down the hill, Gandalf placed his hand gently on Gwaihir's neck. "Thank you," he said softly, "not just for the flight, but for reminding me that even a wizard needs a friend who can see the sky clearly." The great eagle gave a soft, rumbling hum, something between a sigh and a song, and then, without ceremony, spread his wings wide, lifting effortlessly into the air. Gandalf watched until he was only a dark speck against the stars, then nothing at all. Only the wind remained, and within it, a whisper of wings. The wizard turned, walking softly down the slope, back toward the lands where shadows still gathered, where small hands would soon carry great burdens, and where even the gentlest memories could light the darkest paths. The road home was never truly lost, not while there were still those who remembered how to look up and listen. The sky had remembered the way, and so would Gandalf. For even in the heart of the storm, there is always a friend who flies above it. And in the hush between breaths, you might still hear the wings. And so, my sleepy fellows, let this story rest softly in your mind, like a feather drifting down from some high place, gentle and bright. Sleep well now, knowing the sky remembers for you, and one day, when you need it most, that memory might find you again on the breeze. Close your eyes and let the wind carry you westward, toward rest, toward memory, toward home.